Okay, well, we have a lot of intro to do because these next and final sessions of the Ollie term have to do with, for me, a really underappreciated part of 20th century European history. And I thought of this because I started looking at textbooks in 20th century European history, and Hungary does not get much attention. And maybe it's because there's so much about the major powers that this, which I feel is a highly significant power, gets little or no coverage, particularly in the interwar period, which of course is not known to many of us, though some of us will remember when we were children. And maybe we had come in from playing outside and suddenly the soap opera wasn't on because, of course, there was a special bulletin. In my case, we could just get one channel. Yeah, you know how that is. There was a CBS special. Now, this is ancient history, okay? There was a CBS special, and being what, 10, 11, somewhere around in there. I'm thinking, but what about the guiding light, search for tomorrow? No, all of that, the edge of night. Yeah, I mean, those were hard times. I said, what could be so big about this Hungary place? I know that's sad, isn't it? But at that time, some are aware, of course, of the revolt of the Hungarians against the communists and what a significant event was. So that's my little beginning to the knowledge of Hungary, but you have to start somewhere when you're a child, right? So then, of course, the figure of the admiral and his career, and that, of course, led me onward. Now, as Frank has already told you, we have to start with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but to advertise for the fall, and that's significant because I'll be teaching a class in the Middle Ages. I know that's a cheap segue, but yeah, you pardon me for doing that, but it's very interesting that the Hungarians do come up in medieval history, even in these kinds of survey classes. And that, of course, has to do with their ancestors, the Magyars. This, of course, is not going to take long. It's simply to note that in, say, by the 9th century, they were marauding people. And of course, they're pagans. So you say, and that's not good. It's not good to maraud, and it's not good to be a pagan. You need to be going to church. So you know what's going to happen. German Christians, King Otto I by name, is going to straighten these folks out. And not only are they going to be defeated by the Germans under King Otto, but I guess the missionaries are also there to help with the after defeat, and they're going to say, we would love to go to confirmation classes now that we've been defeated. So can you imagine the Magyars lining up for confirmation? But in any event, the conversion of the Magyars and also sort of going this is an Auburn reference, going to Comer Hall and learning about the joys of agriculture as opposed to marauding. I mean, you think I'd love to maraud. That's such fun. But then you think John Deere, that can also be a nice, yes. So all of that is to say, in the plains of Hungary, the Magyars Christianized, settled, and of course, many of you from Catholic school know of Saint Stephen, the great Hungarian king. So all of that is to say, despite their checkered past, these once pagan Magyars settled down to the life of agriculture and Christianity. All of that is merely to set up the history that will follow, which will include periods of subjugation by the Turks. You say, what are they doing? Well, they're going west. So we're just doing this as like a quickie history to understand that as late as the 16th century, the Magyars had come under Turkish rule. Now, we do know the Habsburgs in the 16th century finally pushed the Turks back and made the difference. The difference being that, of course, the Habsburgs would take back Hungary, ergo, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? Except it was the Austrian Empire and you're just a part. Well, how did it become the Austro-Hungarian Empire? I thought you'd never ask. Okay, but you being the great student you are, 1867, another date for you to learn. I know it's tough being you, but 1867, those Hungarians kicked up their heels and said, we want a little bit more RESPECT. And so we want it to be equal, even Steven, no pun intended. But that was bad. That was really bad. But the idea would be the Vienna and Budapest would have equality. Now, that didn't last long, did it? When you think about until World War I. But the same ruler would be the Austrian emperor and the Hungarian king. And just because you're in Budapest or just because you're in Vienna, we're just as good in Budapest. And you're saying, but what about my friends in the Slavic parts? No. You're just there, okay? You be quiet, you behave, and you don't have anything to do with this, okay? So that's the Austro-Hungarian Empire that you see there in baby blue, and they're the Ottoman Turks. So it looks like all the empires are set, and then, of course, the war. The Great War. And the world of the empires then, as we all know, will come to an end. And as a result, Hungary suddenly finds itself independent. And that must have been bizarre if you had been a Hungarian and suddenly your moorings are sort of loosened. I mean, your sense of identification. I mean, you're Hungarian, you're proud, love our goulash, but you ask yourself, are we really ready to be an independent country and deal in this way? Because I'm not sure how much Hungary had actually been independent. Have you ever thought about that? I mean, it's like, it's a very odd business to think about in that area. And you say, well, it's a nice large country. I'm glad you think so, because a lot of other people looked at it and thought about, it looks juicy. I'd like a piece of it. Because we're, again, Sherry, no pun, we're hungry. Yeah. And that, again, is an atrocious pun. But yeah, don't agree so fast. But hey, idea is that the neighbors can be, shall we say, not good friends when they want to eat part of you. And that's exactly what's going to happen, as we will see. But before we can do that, I have to introduce you to another Bella. Some of us know from our film history, Bela Lugosi. He's my favorite Bella. But this is another Bella, a Bella who was Hungarian and who was a sidekick of Lenin. And I guess if you want to be a communist, who better to have as a pal than a Russian, who will, of course, become the founder of the Soviet Union. And so, I mean, I'd call him a sidekick, a pal. And in 1919, now Hungary is just trying to get itself together after the defeat. And I suppose with the inspiration of Lenin, because remember, by this time, we've got the USSR in operation. And so if you were a small version red, and that would be Bela Kun here, you say, wouldn't it be nice if our Workers' Party could lead Hungary into a victory of the proletariat? And that's exactly what happened. And he sort of gets the credit. If you ever get on an exam or quiz show, or it ever comes up at a party, and people say, okay, you know about Lenin, and of course you'll say, of course, what do you want to know? But then they won't leave you alone and follow you and say, who was the second communist government? You can stop them in their tracks. When they hear you say Bela Kun, they will be impressed. Okay, you'll be invited back. Okay, but that is amazing. A lot of people don't know about this. Here he is, though. I'm not saying he's Mr. Hungary. I'm not, but he is definitely important for establishing this very short-lived regime. Because you can imagine you had this group who follow him, and he has, Marx and Lenin's greatest hits, and, all of that, and the Hungarian headquarters. And I'm sure he got lots of nice letters from Lenin saying, I'm so proud of you, and, we'll always be tight, comrade, and all that. And all of this is going on during 1919. And so he makes sort of the history books. If you ever have questions about communist regimes that come and go, that definitely comes and goes in late 1919. So it's what you call a quick turnaround. But I think it indicates the anarchy, seriously, that was going on in Hungary at that time, that they could establish that regime. And he headed north to where, the Soviet Union, so he could help out his friends around Lenin. And you think this is going to have a happy ending. Well, it doesn't. I'm sorry. It seemed good at the time. Who wouldn't want to live in Moscow? Well, I wouldn't, but that's not the point. The point is that as long as Lenin was alive in the 1920s, Yeah, Bela Kun did very well. He was in charge of various hit squads, and he could carry out all kinds of great work for the Comintern, which could be a bit unpleasant, but to the people to whom he was inflicting it. But after Lenin was incapacitated, yeah, it all kind of collapsed. Joseph Stalin is the operative term. Bela Kun actually ended up by the late 30s imprisoned, and we now think he was executed in 1938 or 39. You can understand until after the Cold War, they wouldn't even admit that. And they basically said, you know what happened? He got sick. And I think he forgot to get his shots or something. You know, and it yeah, I won't use that word, but that's ugly. But yes, no doubt about it. He Stalinist purges, which seems very ironic. So because he was so dedicated. So there you have the brief leap into Leninist communism on the part of the Hungarians. And all this time now we're getting into 1920. The Allies have not yet dealt with Hungary. And you say, well, why not? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they're not going to deal with no Reds admitted. We're not going to deal with any old Bela Kun or that crowd, comrade. Yeah. So basically, if you ever are asked, and it may come up in the very intellectual circles into which you run, I'm sure, then you understand, you just say 1920. Yeah. And people will be impressed. But of course, we need a ruler. In this case, a sad one. At least to me. He's known as Charles IV. He's very nice looking, isn't he? His uncle was the late Franz Ferdinand. Some of you remember he was assassinated. And so his great uncle, not to get too mixed up in genealogical trees, designated this fellow as his heir. I think his father was something of a degenerate, and so he was cut off. So he became, as of 1916, the Habsburg ruler. And as it turned out, the end of the line. Yeah. Unless there's somebody out there hanging around who may be the last Slavic ruler. Yeah. But meanwhile, back to reality, this individual, he wanted it badly. He wanted to get the throne. And you say, but the throne of what? Well, of Hungary. I mean, that's about all that's left. You say, well, where's Austria? Oh, they're off in a little separate kingdom now. And these other people that we're going to talk about shortly will also be separated. So you take what you can get, don't you? And Hungary, at least on the part of some Hungarians, seems like Charles would be good. And Charles at that point was hanging out in Switzerland, nice place to be. And he made some attempts to reclaim power. I think he came over from Switzerland to Hungary and sort of feel out the situation. And that's how turbulent it was. I mean, you have a king in exile and the claim, but only a claim, to a country that has now finally been rid of the communists. So what can I say? It didn't work out. And in fact, he will go back into exile and dies in Switzerland in 1922. If there is a Habsburg out there, and there could be, and may well be, we do understand that this is the last individual who seemed to have a legitimate claim to the throne. And it's not to say that he's a bad fellow, it's simply that he lacked the wherewithal to be able to gain the authority because Hungary was just in a mess, big mess. But at least now there was a governor. I am showing you a photograph of the admiral in what I'd call later middle age, wouldn't you say? But he was every inch the heroic figure sort, as you can tell, with all of the medals and awards and whatnot. And he will be designated, which I think is interesting, as regent. I know, I thought about why regent, because he didn't necessarily get along with King Charles. As a matter of fact, he's the one who sort of, I think, gave him that one-way ticket to Bern or Geneva. And so, yeah, we kind of need to hit the road, man. But regent, I guess, is about as far as he could go in terms of designating himself as the leader. It is a figure like president, not like prime minister. Oh no, we're going to have our ministers, but we are sort of the, like Israel, Britain, because you're sort of in charge, but then we have all these officials who come and go. Oh, like in France. Yeah, I know. Think Macron will last. I don't know. Yeah, but it's all of that. But in fact, the admiral will last from 1922 to 1940. Yeah, pretty good run. And in many ways, even past that. But anyway, I just thought this particular portrait was quite the dramatic one, and the idea of the great hero. I'm sure he had enemies, but as far as the Allies were concerned, and that is what we used to call the Entente, or we could also call them winners, I guess. They were pretty sick of dealing with the Hungarian issues. I mean, Austria was bad enough. Now, we all love Austria, Sound of Music, I get that. But let's go back to the Austro-Hungarian Empire for a minute. And you're thinking about what a small country it is. Yes, it is. It had Salzburg, as we all know, and it had the huge Vienna, but much of it, of course, was rural and small. It's beautiful, those of you who've been there still. And many of the Austrian leaders, you know what they had asked the Allies for? To be part of Germany. You know, you all talk about nationalism. Yeah, we want to be nationalists. So, and we are German all the time. So, can't we join Germany? And they said, afraid not. You're a loser, not a winner. And losers don't get to do what they want. Yeah. So, there you are for Austria. You'll be independent. And you do the best you can. So that's Austria. Oh, did I forget to mention reparations? Yeah, you're going to pay until it hurts. So, what about Hungary now? Off we go in June of 1920. Look at those folks in their best bib and tuck. They are done up just like, yeah, Marshal Pétain, his best done. So I'm thinking these are Hungarians. Now, you say, I wonder if there were any Bolsheviks. I think not. I don't think they have these outfits. I don't think they're into that kind of. No. They would. Now I know they would in a Mao outfit or something. You remember those Mao? Yeah. So yeah, they would be in it. No, these people with gloves, top hats, and guess where they're going, future tourists? The palace at Trianon. Very nice. And instead of staying at a Days Inn, this may be something you want to consider. Okay. I mean, that's just an idea. But now that you've had it, I mean, love my Red Roof Inn. Don't knock it. But this really nice. Because I went online, to sort of study the Trianon, and then I thought they were booking, giving special rates. And I'm thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done this. This is not good. Because, 100 years ago, they wouldn't have had these people. Stand over here, Madge. I'll get your picture. It's not good for my imagery of the Trianon, but there are those Hungarians in the day of Admiral Hardy going through there and going up there to get what I can assure you is not a happy message. Why is it not happy? Well, because they don't say, I know you didn't cause the war, and we really like you, and we hope to work with you in the future. No, it was like, you represent Hungary, and Hungary has to bear responsibility like everyone else. Oh, did we mention reparations? Because we have a lot of those lined up for you. I mean, I imagine these folks, these Hungarian representatives of Admiral Hardy's government, were not pleased at all. Because in the treaty, and I was so lucky to find this map, you can read all kinds of fractions, and I have, about how much land was taken from Hungary, or how many people, how many millions. But I thought for our purposes, it would be enough just to enjoy, relatively speaking, the various colored parts would give you an idea. Let's start northward with those Czech people. See what they did? They didn't say, oh, you made a mistake, Hungary, but we love you. No, they took all of that territory. You say, but the Romanians, the Yugoslavs, you call them Serbs, but Bosnians, we call them a lot of things, but they get a piece too. And you say, look, that's so nice. That little, see the little black area there? That's little Austria. Yeah. Edelweiss. Yeah. Yeah. Mixed Julianders. So all of this then is see these territories. You say, man, we're down to skin and bones. Look at that. And you say, if you were Hungarian, what do you do now? You get mad. And you don't say, well, this is all the way it had to be, and so let there be peace, and let us beat swords into plowshares. I don't think so. We're mad. What was that movie, 1976? We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking, you suppose they could say that in Budapest in late 1920, because they were fairly irritated. They're what we call a revisionist power, meaning that as far as Hungarians are concerned, we're going to get it back. And when we do, it's not going to be a hug for you. There's going to be some kicking of you know what. Yeah, I mean, it's like, but we want the world of peace. All the world needs love, sweet love. But that ain't going to happen. It is not going to happen. So I'm just telling you, after the Treaty of Trianon and all these Czechs and the others, Romanians and whatnot, we want this, we want that. And of course, at this point, the Hungarians are in no position to resist, because the winners, that is to say, the Entente powers, are enforcing it. And who's really concerned? Well, I'll tell you who's not concerned. The United States and Great Britain. What they're doing in Central Europe. You know how people will say, this annoys me so much, so you don't ever do this. Whatever. You know, because that is just, yeah. I mean, yeah. Being around children. Yeah. Yes. But I mean, that sounds indifferent, apathetic, and I don't like that. So that is more or less the situation you're in with this particular matter, that there is no possibility the Hungarians are going to accept it, that yes, for the time being, we'll deal with it. Of course, they do have other problems. They have problems being Hungary, and they want to be a member of the League of Nations and do all the things that a country does now that we're past being communists, because we want stability and be a part of 1920s Europe. Because you can imagine, if they had stayed communists, what kind of reaction would they have had? About like the Soviet Union did. Ew. You know, it took them all the 1920s to get accepted. Those communists, those red devils, we are in no mood for that. But now we have this great naval admiral, don't we? So we do. And I thought I'd show you another map just to give you even more of a perspective on the size. So if the British and the Americans aren't concerned, you can guess which big two are very concerned. Italy and France. They are watching the Hungarian situation with what I would call great interest. Because, of course, remember, if you were French, every night you go to bed and say, someday the Germans will come back. So we need lots of friends. And of course, part of that, some of you will remember when I talked about the so-called Little Entente. In other words, we're trying to form because they assumed that, like the Germans, the Hungarians are angry. And when conditions are favorable, they're going to let their anger take some kind of physical reaction. So, not good. We need to be ready. And of course, the Italians, territorially ambitious. Can I say that? Yeah. It means they want more land. And it means, but it's mine. Well, that's what you say. We would like to take some. And as some will remember, Italians and Yugoslavs are always at each other. And you say, but can't we be friends? Love each other? So it's in the plowshare? No. So that will go on, and that will be an issue. And there is Hungary. Look at that big old Czechoslovakia. Very scary, very intimidating. Those poor Hungarians. But again, it's very interesting when you see Poland. And it's very interesting to note, and when you talk about Hungary and Poland, you find out that at first, when the Germans invaded Poland, the Hungarians are going to say, you know what? Poland's not such a bad country. We kind of like the Poles. So there you are. It's a strange business how relationships go, but that's how it was as far as Hungary. As Frank pointed out, it's a landlocked country. It's a very, very small country, and lots of people in Romania, Yugoslavia, and Czechoslovakia are saying, we don't want to be here. They are sullen, yeah. They're really angry, but they can't pout because they got too much to do. Now, times will change, as we see. I've always found this term Vienna Awards. I know it sounds like a concert or some sort of a musical show and somebody's going to win a prize, but it wasn't exactly like that. But it happened in Vienna. And this, of course, in the days of Nazis and fascists. But you see who was there. Actually, two people who disliked each other very much. And entirely understandable on both ones. Ribbentrop and Chano. The sort of number twos in Germany and Italy. And so they give two, quote unquote, awards. And you see where the awards are going. And to our friends in Hungary, we would like to give the following. I mean, it's like, some sort of great presentation. And you see the second and the first, and these are 1938, 1940. These are lands because by that point, the Hungarians are beginning to act in a friendly way, shall we say, towards the Axis. But it takes time, because I'm prepared to argue that the Hungarians weren't necessarily in the same ideals, beliefs as German Nazis or Italian fascists. But we will see that as we go. And look at this. I especially thought this was interesting because of the language. The areas, when you see this, let's go north first and look at the areas in purple. And you say, gosh, I bet the Slovaks were perturbed. Well, they may have been, but you know, when Italy and Germany tell you to do it, the nature of a sycophant, you don't say, well, you know, we would like to issue an official protest or something. They just take this land and they say, you know, going to Hungary. And you say, yeah, Hungary. So then you see, oh, Transylvania, Bela Lugosi again. There you go. I told you he was coming up. So all of that land, which I think is interesting. And you see these lands in this off green color down here, which of course would irritate Yugoslavia. I'm sure they had 20 years. And you know, you can have a lot of love in 20 years. And it's like, now you were here and now you're gone. But these are territories that Hungary received back as a result of their relationship with the Axis. And again, you think, well, where are the French? Well, the French have got their own problems, don't they? And the Italians, for that matter, are allied to the Germans. So it's more or less to say that these issues work very well for Hungary, at least in the short term. But that's where Hungary decided to go. Now, I call him authoritarian, which runs quite a wide sweep, doesn't it? You always wonder, who's authoritarian? Well, any kind of regime that doesn't permit what we consider to be basic rights, as in the first 10 amendments, the Constitution, that kind of thing. But I'm not willing to say it's just fascists or communists. You know, we always talk about totalitarianism and those kinds of things. Authoritarian, we've already talked about. I hope you remember, this could be on the final. Dollfuss. Yes, I see that glint of recognition. That's beautiful. Oh, God, what brilliance. Yeah, Engelbert Dollfuss. Not Humperdinck. Don't even. No, you lost points because of that. You're not getting a bonus. Yeah. It's more or less to understand that people who are in parties that we don't like, you need to shut up and keep down. Authoritarians sometimes tend to be into the religious mode. They tend to like people that we would consider to be property, blue blood. You get the general idea of the wealthy, privileged, church folks, all that rest, who would be supportive of a ruler because we don't want folks misbehaving. And people have a way of misbehaving, don't they? Yeah. So, got to keep them. So an authoritarian is not going to say, I wonder how my polls are doing. We're not doing no George Gallup. That's a party pooper. We don't want any of that. We are in charge. So the regime of just put it Miklos. I meant Admiral Horty.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry about that.
Should call it.
But all of that is to say that in addition to the economic restoration of Hungary, he did not brook any kind of, well, I just want to see what you feel and share with you my ideas. Let's see if we can get a consensus. Maybe we can all have a big kumbaya before you leave. No, I think this is definitely, and we love the military, but a naval admiral's not used to saying, maybe we can take a vote and see if all you sailors want to do this. No. And by the way, he had a brilliant career in the Austro-Hungarian Navy, and he came from a great family, something like 5 or 6 different languages, including German, English, Hungarian. It's quite impressive in terms of what he brought to this. Now, you come in and say, would you like to borrow my copy of Marx and Lenin's greatest hits? And he would show you the door. Okay, you're out. We're not talking about the big C, no communism. So all of that would create, I think, difficult relations between the Soviet Union and Hungary, if there were any. I seriously doubt it, because his ideas, he would not allow the Communist Party. And I can just imagine if our friend Bella came back, for a reunion, the communists get together, I'd stay in Moscow if I were Bella. Yes. On the other hand, it's not fair to call him a Nazi either. There were various parties that we'll talk about that had Nazi tendencies, but this is not a party political group supporting Admiral Horthy. His group is authoritarian, elitist. We're not looking to the masses. The Nazis and groups of that kind are looking to the masses and saying, we're going to rule, the people are going to rule, and and all of that. If you go back and consider the Nazis before 1933, you'll see that. Oh, of course, they will draw in the elites, but that's later. I'm saying, in other words, he rules as an authoritarian with the support of the Hungarian upper classes. Because after 1919, if you were upper class Hungarian, do you want another Bella coming? No, you do not. You want them, go to Russia. Not in Budapest. Thank you very much. Okay. No reds allowed. Okay. You stay in the closet or something. You just do not mess with us. So there were various groups. How could there not be? Especially as the 1920s become 1930s and the Great Depression. Hungary is affected by the Great Depression, just like everybody else, in terms of unemployment and in terms of all the rest of the economic problems. So that is something that we can definitely bear in mind as we look and consider. Here was one, and apparently from what I have read, this was the largest. The Arrow Cross Party. And what does that mean exactly? Well, I guess what you could say is that it means whatever connections they had to Germans, they, like so many other parties that were roaming around in the period, existed not just in Hungary or Germany, but they existed in a variety of areas, and they appeal to the masses, if I may use that word, and they are assuring you that we're going to lead you into freedom from the fear of communism and all of these upper class folks who are telling you what to do, and we're your true friends. In other words, it is a version of fascism because we love the big H. Yes. And that doesn't affect your eating habits. This is Hungary, right? All of that nationalism, of course, is a critical part. Look at that, Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party. And again, if you think about Nazi national, people forget about that, the National Socialist Workers' Party. You forget about that and you think, oh, the Nazis, they were all about the upper classes. Well, that's not true at all. But this big Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party, it must have been an imitation of Nazis, the Nazis being older, or perhaps it's just that it's like you have groups in various countries who all come up with similar ideas. And if you're wondering if they're anti-Semitic, you can count on it. Because clearly, I mean, that is always, well, we would say the sine qua non. I mean, that's got to be, yeah, that's got to be on our list of musts. We've got to be anti-Semitic, we've got to be anti-communist, and all the rest of it that we would associate with all of these groups, with few exceptions. Now, and Hungarian Socialist Workers' Party seems to have been the most obvious one in terms of being a small-time version of the Nazis. But, you know, in a somewhat free society, that's what I'll call Hungary in the 1930s, perhaps you have the opportunities to form your own group. I mean, there are lots of discontented folks. Check the internet if you don't believe me. Lord have mercy. Folks, yeah, and you think, let's just all just be happy. And you think, get a hobby, right? Yeah, go flying. Do something, get out, fresh air, feeling good. And that will help your disposition. But these folks definitely needed a better disposition. Yeah. Balance of nature, they needed to be taken, I guess. But the idea being, they needed something because everybody's griping, but it's not like, oh, we love our admiral. I want you to understand that. I think that's so important. It's not like they're all aboard this authoritarian regime. Now, does he like them? No. I mean, I know I'm trying to sing what the world needs now. It's love, sweet love. But I can't always get it in practice, right? I can get it theoretically, right? But in this case, these groups are definitely, I mean, look in Austria. And who can forget the death of Schuschnigg in 1934? Some of you will never forget that. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, you could lose points. Yeah, you remember that now. Vienna, go back in your notes. And I don't mean Cliff Notes either. I mean, but seriously, that is amazing when you think about these parties. Now, when these groups were forming, perhaps they reached out to Berlin, by the 1930s, and the Nazi regime, the Third Reich, had been established. And maybe they were sending notes. I mean, they were literate. And they were saying, we're here and we would love to have some contact, ecumenical activities between Hungary and Germany. But by and large, at this particular point, while the admiral takes a dim view of anything associated with communism, he is not going to be supportive of these, what would he say, call them now, ultra-right? Yeah. He is hardly what you would call a moderate, and certainly not a little d Democrat. No. He's an authoritarian. And I'll stick with that one. Authoritarian. And I think we got that. And so if, any of these groups, you're trouble, capital T, whether you're left wing, right wing, and I don't want any liberals either. And I want folks in church. Yeah. And don't be hanging out on the streets late at night. We don't want troublemakers either. So you say, yeah, I got my rights. No, you don't. Okay. So that's what the authoritarian does. So it is amazing actually to think that if the Germans reached out to Hungary, the Hungarians may not have reached out back to them. And that's kind of always interested me, because I automatically thought, oh, yeah, they were all part of the same group. But I think the Nazis had to do some serious courting to bring about the Hungarians. And maybe, as we find out, 1937, that this party, a very right-wing, pro-German party, will be legalized by the Hungary government. Why does he do it? Some would say he did it as a favor to the Germans, but it certainly did allow for a difference in German-Hungarian relations, because let's face it, if the Hungarians want a chance to get their lands back, they need a big buddy. And I don't think anybody else is out there. I mean, you can't reach out after you said some ugly things about the Russians. Could you think, Stalin, I was all wrong about you. I really love you, Big Joe. No, I think it's a little late for that. There would have been some damn you, Stalin. Yeah, and that hurts. So when we use language like that, you can't go back. I was just kidding. I really like you a lot. No, I don't think so. But I think the Admiral and Hitler, it's like a little rocky at first. It's like that first time coming together, and maybe we can make this work. So yeah, that was period of 37, 38, when that began to gel. Can I show this?
Sure go.
Okay. And this is very interesting because, in fact, it was named for Prince Eugene of Savoy. Yeah.
And that shit that got something visual.
Yeah, and it will be,
I got sunk with Bismarck, it was a long road. Yeah.
yeah, and actually the Americans got it after World War II. And it'll be used for atomic testing and subsequently it hits eBay. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah,
Sleeps with fishes.
yes, yeah. It's
And
gone
was
bye
during
bye.
World War I too.
But it's absolutely very important to these two in 1938 because, of course, you're going to see the visit of the admiral to Germany.
Mit dem Namen des Reichsfeldmarschalls grüßen wir eine Vergangenheit gemeinsamen Stolzes und grüßt uns die Heldenzeit gemeinsamen nationalen Wollens. Darum sind wir glücklich, dass gerade in dieser feierlichen Stunde seine Durchlaucht der Reichsverweser des Königreichs Ungarns mit ihrer Durchlaucht Frau von Horthy in unserer Mitte weilt. Wir grüßen seine Durchlaucht als den ruhmvollen Flottenchef der Kaiser- und Königlichen Österreichischen Ungarischen Flotte, in der Schiffe mit dem Namen Prinz Eugen ehrenvoll gekämpft haben.
It's amazing. First of all, did you see all the adoring workers? Because that was their baby, because that was quite a feat. And so whatever you may think of the background, it is not surprising that they were so caught up in the moment of completion. Why I wanted you to see that was, of course, this, as far as I'm aware, is the first meeting between the two leaders in person. I mean, they may have talked, communicated, but this is the idea. Now, she, that is the First Lady of Hungary, had been invited to do this task of christening since Hitler wasn't married. I assume, though, that this is an all-German project. This is not connected to the Hungarians in any major way. But no doubt, while the Admiral and his wife were there, they were, I guess you'd say, wined and dined. And I'm sure they didn't go, I'm sorry, Sherry, hungry, because they, yeah, I know. I'm sorry, it's a disease and it gets worse. Yeah, it's not like control. Yeah, control issues. But the idea being that when he goes back to Budapest, it's got to make him feel good. I mean, we were asked to be here. And this would have been the summer of 1938. And a swirl of thoughts about 1938, I know, flooding your head now. It's like a treasure of information, makes you scary in a way. Yeah, knowledge can be dangerous. Yeah. So I'm very impressed that you do know that, and you think, you mean, in other words, yeah, I think we're headed for the Axis, meaning that Hungary is going to join with Italy and Germany, because it seems that's where our path needs to be. But again, this is really just ceremonial. It doesn't have any significance beyond that, except for the fact that maybe Hitler was just trying to impress Admiral Honey and say, look, you look, the team you will be with when you join with us. We don't bring up 1945. Like I said, one of the great things about history is you don't know the future. So we understand at the time, 1938, we're just going great. Everything is just super keen. And we would love to have you on our team. Have you noticed there's no more Austria? Yeah, you're thinking, gosh, it's 1938. I know, you've already figured it out. This is after Anschluss, isn't it? So Austria's, auf Wiedersehen, it's another state in Germany. And so the Hungarians are thinking, well, I don't think the Germans want us, because, I mean, we're Magyars, we're good people, but we're not Slavs.
Not Aryans either.
No, but you're sort of in between. But we can like you. Okay, don't love you. We can like you. You're okay. You Hungarians are okay. And we like your food. But by and large, there is a kind of tension between what they are willing to do in terms of this relationship. Because again, we do have these radical parties now legal, but the admiral is still in control, and he will remain so until 1944. And of course, you know, and I know, 1938 is going to become 1939, and you're going like, yeah, I know. And you're probably already thinking about June and all that's going to come. Yes, I am beginning to get vibrations of the terror. And of course, if you're going to get aboard this German train, you better get you a car, because we're getting ready. And that will be very important, because, you know, we really kind of like Poland. What is it? Polish ham? Is that what they're famous for? Yeah. Again, the food. So maybe it goes with the Hungarian. Yeah, goulash. So, but the idea being that Hungarians and Poles are not necessarily enemies. We've had some good times. But sometimes you have to make choices about who's you're going to be friends with. You might want to love everybody, but sometimes that just isn't possible by the late 1930s. And that's the big decision that the Hungarian government will have to determine. So I'm going to start there next time. And thank you all. I've enjoyed this. Appreciate y'all coming today. And that series, we need to watch that series if we haven't seen it, right? Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Everybody wants to watch that, I'm sure. God, how many recommendations have I had? I just barely walked in. And they were starting up, is that HBO or Showtime?
Netflix, please.
Net,
Make sure you get Netflix.
okay,
Not HBO.
I'm sorry, I just.
All right, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Don't get HBO. Don't get